Questo è un luogo che genera dialogo,
Qualcuno che si impegna, che si batte.
che approfondisce la conoscenza e sostiene la fiducia. È un crocevia dove si incontra chi desidera il vero, il bello, il giusto e il bene. È una testimonianza di speranza nel cuore ferito del presente. E tutto questo
Proporre con la propria vita.
esiste anche grazie a te.
Buongiorno a tutti.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this first session at the Arena Trace. The Arena Trace was inaugurated last year on the occasion of the 50 years of the International Journal of Comunione e Liberazione, and this year we were happy to repropose this at the in Frigerio, in charge of the CL website and of the digital presence of the movement. And one of the novelties of this year is here in front of us. That is, some of our sessions are inside the halls of the meeting so that more people have the chance to attend. So we want to thank the meeting for this opportunity. You are all welcome to visit Arena Trace in the A3 area. And this area is meant to be a dialogue and meeting point with people that we have met during the year and of whom we have narrated the stories on the Trace magazine or in the CL website. And we also take this as an opportunity to go deeper into some of the issues that are so dear to our readers, such as vocation. And for this, we have invited Maria Francesca Righi, Cistercian nun and abbess of the monastery of Val Serena near Pisa. I would like to thank her so much for accepting our invitation. And she will be in dialogue with Paolo Prosperi, priest of the Fraternity of San Charles Borromeo. And with these two guests, I'll just give them the floor. I give the floor to Father Paolo for this session to begin. Thank you all. Good afternoon. It is a joy and an honor for me to be here with Maria Francesca, Sister Maria Francesca, whom I have known for a few years now, and we have had multiple opportunities to get to know each other. And Sister Maria Francesca is, in my view, one of the greatest living experts of St. Bernard's thought. She curated the translation and the edition of some works. Take a look at that on the internet, you'll find that. She's in charge of the Vita Nostra magazine, which is also very interesting, and I invite you all to get more acquainted with that, and I'm sure that you will be more and more interested in this after this session. She's really the best person who can help us go deeper into this word that is so charged with fascination and promise, that is vocation. As we all know, vocation means calling. That is, inside the life and the heart of each and every one of us, there is the intuition of a promise that is to be called to fulfill ourselves and to fulfill something great, something worthy through our own existence. And it is in this calling which is the sense of our life. The sense of our life is revealed and it is deployed. But in a way, this word includes what is most essential to the meaning of our life. But this word is also a mysterious word, an enigmatic word, which is easy to be misunderstood, which can be easily misunderstood. We called Sister Righi because she is a monk, and vocation in general understanding is seen as something that is related to consecrated people, but it is a narrow view of vocation, whereas for others that are less fortunate or not, that have not been elected by God in a way, have not been so familiar with this word. I'm sure that Sister Rigi will help us overcome this misunderstanding and help us reflect deeply into the meaning of the word vocation. So let's go to the first question. The first question is this: what is the meaning of the word vocation? What does this word mean, first and foremost, in the conception of human existence that is proper of the Church? But also, how would you personally describe the essential features of the meaning of this word? In a way, what is the meaning of the word vocation?
Provo a rispondere, vediamo se...
I'll try to give an answer. The question actually already included the answer and the difficulty in understanding the real meaning of this word. The reason why I have accepted to be here, it's exactly this, that this meeting was going to deal with the word vocation. We are tired of hearing that there are no more vocations. What does that mean? Every single person in the world has his or her own vocation. So I would say if this word is still used, it is usually understood as something that I'm called to do, the thing that gives more evidence to my own talents that can define my life in professional terms within the family or as a religious person. Catechism gives this word a real meaning, that is to say, along the horizon according to which human life is in itself a vocation. That means that there is someone who calls us. And so there is a responsibility, a response to be lived. I do not think it's out of place to apply to every kind of vocation what St. John Paul II says of himself in Gift and Mystery. And I summarize the story of my priestly vocation. He says, vocation as a priest, but everyone has their own vocation, and is best known by God. Vocation is a mystery, a great mystery, and it is a gift that infinitely surpasses man. Each of us experiences this very clearly throughout our lives. This is the mystery of divine election. So it's not someone who chooses what they like most, what is more convenient. It's the mystery of someone choosing us. So before you were formed within the womb of your mother, I knew you. And in a very brief way, another quote from the Mystery of Vocation by Joan of Arc. It's Jeanette says, everyone has the vocation to be saved. The whole Christian world has a vocation to attain its salvation, and the rest of the world has a vocation to become Christian. So I'd say this is quite simple, actually. Catechism, in a very clear way, says Christ, by revealing the mystery of the Father and his love, has revealed man to himself and made his supreme calling very clear. And also in the Catechism, the 3 chapters says the life of the Spirit realizes the vocation of man, which is the connection between the Father and the man. It's made up of divine charity and human solidarity. So it is the work of the Son, and it is freely given as salvation. So this is a work of the Father. So work of the Son, the Father, and the Spirit. We are faced here with a communion of subjects who interact with each other, whereas usually it seems that the problem is that of my personal fulfillment, otherwise known as my success, or, very worldly, my own success. Another poetic text expresses very well what it means to be the object of a calling. If God calls you, my child, when God takes someone, when God takes a soul, torments a soul, there is much to do. One must surrender. You cannot escape. You cannot get away. The hand of God is heavy. The work of God is a secret work, is a consuming fire. How will our poor carcasses resist it? Listen, then, listen. If God calls you, you will not resist God. If God calls you, for whatever reason, you will not resist him. The monastic tradition makes this calling very visible in its most famous texts. Let's us listen to the beginning of the De Contemplando Deo, where William de Saint-Giré embodies the one who calls and says, "Come, let us go up the mountain of the Lord, to the house of God." Attention, intention, will, thoughts, affections, feelings, all of you who are in my heart, come, let's go up the mountain, the place where Lord sees and is seen. That means the whole of the human person in all of its dimensions, in all its different expressions, is called to go up the mountain and meet the mystery that is revealed just like Moses on the Mount of Alliance, or the crowd that listens to Jesus. But the first call we experience is the wonder of being born, of being in the world. The ancient philosophers were right when they said that wonder is the beginning of conscious thought, the amazement at the mystery of the being that I am and of the reality that I am called to embrace. An amazement that arises from the awareness of not knowing, so that thought arises from the question, precor pregare. That vocation, like the word received in that encounter, is what gives meaning, significance, and purpose to my life, my future, which illuminates my memory by telling me that if I am, it is because I am wanted, called, loved. This is the memory of the origin. It is what tells me that reality is given to me and that I, myself, am a gift, a present. So it's future, present, and the memory of the past. This awareness takes place in a relationship, or rather in the realization of a presence that precedes, accompanies, and fulfills. It precedes as a father who loves and creates through love, accompanies as a father who educates, and as a son who accompanies, cum panis, as a son, brother, spouse who sustains, redeems, and finally fulfills as the Spirit who is the bond, the fulfilled relationship between father and son. Bernard says he breathed on them and said, "You will receive the Holy Spirit." It was certainly a kiss, that bodily breath. No, the invisible Spirit was given precisely with that breath of the Lord to signify that it proceeded equally from him and from the Father, like a true kiss, which is common to the one who kisses and the one who is kissed. So the vocation is the link between origin and fulfillment, between the particular everyday and the infinite. Other names, being loved. If I am, it is because I am wanted. I'm not the result of a chance or a technical plan, but of a wise design. But who calls and what does he call? We have heard the beginning of the De Contemplando. The person in all his faculties is called, the intelligence that gives him the ability to understand the truth, the affectus that receives the blow, the emotion of goodness, and above all freedom, which is the union of reason and affection that will the wheel that sets reason and affection in motion and begins what can rightly be called an adventure, the adventure of responding to the charm of the unity of beauty, goodness, and truth. Vocation is a convincing appeal that arises from a surprising and unexpected encounter, and it's a call to embrace reality as a whole, an embrace of experience in the totality of its factors. Bernard also says, we read in the book of the experience, you have to examine your own awareness about the things we are about to say. So, the encounter that is seen as a calling is first and foremost a call to the true self-knowledge. Vocation tells you who you are, but also who you are not. You are a beloved child, wanted and destined for fulfillment, but you are not the center of the world. You are not the measure of all things. You are great because you are the image of God, but you're not God. You are an image of God. And in the coexistence of these two realities, the dramatic disproportion that is created that makes the adventure of being human so exciting. The vocation of the young Samuel, which means God listens, is also paradigmatic. So vocation is listening to God, but God listens to you. The story of Samuel's calling allows us to grasp the fundamental features of discernment. The one who was called 3 times and then he was told, go back to your own home, and then he comes back. So listening and recognizing the divine initiative, a personal experience. Vocation is not imposed on Samuel as a destiny to be endured. It is a proposal of love, a missionary invitation in a story of daily mutual trust. And then I would like to read another small text by Bernard, who reinterprets the parable of the prodigal son as a call, because vocation is not just an event, it is a path. There is a beginning, there is a path, and there is an end. And so it's something that is matured from up to the final victory. God, who is rich and powerful, adopted as his son the men whom he had created. To him, as to a tender child, he assigned as teachers the law and the prophets and all other guardians. And he instructed and taught him and gave him the free will, so that the good he did would be a free choice and not a compulsion. Having been given the power to do good and bad, man began to grow weary of his happiness and started to develop a desire to experience both good and evil. So he left the paradise of good conscience in search of new things. He, who had no experience except of good, set aside his father's laws and teachers and ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil against his father's prohibition. Then, hiding himself, he started to flee like an inexperienced child. And in the end, he arrives at the castle of wisdom, where the son finds the embrace of the father and is helped by the gifts from the Holy Spirit. So actually, vocation is an encounter that produces a following and tends toward fulfillment. The discovery of one who calls and of me who respond to the call. The experience of a rediscovered sonship. Just another small observation based on my own experience. I'm not talking as a teacher or as an abbess, but like a small being of the earth. And I go back to a text that reminds me of my youth before I met God. This gives an image of the distance between my own person and what I was being called to. The text says, I have seen the people of my age going away along streets that lead to nowhere. And then it said, my generation is ready for a new world, a revolution without weapons. And so this is where I started from. And this is the first aspect of the formative method that I encountered, of the charism. It is not a new theory on formation. It's nothing more than a particular breath in living, expressed in a positive outlook, a positive hypothesis of reading the person, which, however, does not deny the negative in order to hide or mask it, nor does it reveal it in order to destroy it, but rather makes it a path of conversion and common edification. And I conclude with this text that talks about something different from the text before. This is more of a prayer by Saint Hilarius that says, God, you will allow me to talk to you frankly. I am not I am a small human being, but I am changed by your love. Before knowing you, I didn't know the sense of life. There was no happiness in my existence. And thanks to your mercy, I have started to live. And now I know without any ambiguity. I have been taught in my faith with no escape in the conscience of your presence. Oh God, forgive me. I cannot be freed from you. I could only die for you. And then the time gave me different proofs, and I couldn't really understand them, but I gave you my life. Now I'm yours.
Grazie.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mother. A lot of food for thought, really, in this first answer. You said that calling is a convincing appeal from an unexpected meeting. And you discussed that in detail with respect to the meaning. And that made me think of Tolkien's mythology after the creation of the elves. The first word after their awakening that was glancing the beauty of the starred sky was ele, that is, to see, the one who see. So the first calling is this mystery of fascination, of reality. The first answer that, in a way, contains in itself the trajectory of the entire existence, is this marvel. It is a mystery calling to something good that is not clearly defined, the nostalgia of the sky, of the stars, of the desire. This observation of mine about seeing, about looking at something, is connected to the second question. So if this is the meaning of vocation, what is the way to discover one's vocation? What are the main criteria to discern one's own vocation? In this calling to observe, to see, there is an initial answer indeed, but looking at your experience as educator, as a person accompanying vocations, what is most helpful to understand the Lord's will in one's life, and so to find one's own path?
Well, also in this case, I have to start from the point of view of my own vocation. But I do believe that the criteria of our tradition could be useful to everyone. And also for the theme of discernment, as with the word vocation, there is a path. There is an initial discernment, and then there is a discernment during the path, and then the final one at the time of our death. So you can actually have discernment in giving advice to other persons. There is another kind of discernment that can be for a nun, the time of the simple profession, or for a married woman, the time of the engagement. And then you find difficulties you have to overcome. And at the beginning, one might say, well, it's too difficult for me. That means that I have no vocation. This is actually stupid, if you can forgive me for my choice of terms. It is a very important moment to make our choice real, to start and understand ourselves and give the right name to the things we are experiencing. And then the final perseverance. And again here, like for the word of vocation, we need to make a distinction between the subjects. The nun tradition says that if you count on yourself, you count on someone who has no wisdom. A person cannot follow only its own criteria, and he could become someone who never finds his final goal. And then there is the church that has the duty to accompany. But before being able to accompany someone else, you have to be accompanied. So we have to use the right terms, fathers and mothers in the faith. So this actually brings us back to what happens to the heart of men and women. So we needed to have a certain awareness of what happens inside us. In the Bible, we use the term heart to indicate the central point of a person's interiority. The new heart is not an individual gift. It regards the whole of Israel. The same says the Gospel. And Jesus insists on the importance of interiority and places the heart at the center of life. So what are the criteria for discernment that the monastic tradition offers? And first of all, what is the discernment of spirits? It is a very spiritual reality, the skill to understand what is in line with God's will from what is not. So the question is, what do I want, but what do you want for me and from me? What is this and what is not this? It is a process of listening and choosing. Let's think about Elijah, who recognizes the voice of subtle silence. Jesus recognizes the voice of the Father from that of the tempter. And discernment is the fruit of an interior conversion. And to this, the rule of Saint Benedict adds, test the spirits to see whether they are from God. And reciprocally, the aspirant is asked to truly seek God. The monastic tradition then takes up these criteria, internalizing them in the figure of the spiritual struggle or the combat of thoughts. The first monk, Antonio, says, great is the struggle against demons, and difficulty is the way of the heart. Every thought must be examined to see where it comes from and where it leads. Bernard puts this into practice in his parables and sentences, but and it's also a fundamental part of his teaching. Ignatius of Loyola develops it systematically in the discernment of spirits, in the spiritual exercises. But how can I discern if the proposal made to me, the encounter I've had, the word I have received is in harmony with the questions, even the unspoken questions, and with the deepest desires of my conscience? Maybe it makes me understand that I have desires I didn't know I had. Is this the beginning of the path, personal experience? The word convert, said in passing as I climbed the steps to enter school, was felt as the proposal of life. At first, I felt offended, but then I understood there was something that questioned my freedom. And I understood that I could be free because someone else finally made a proposal to me. My freedom was to choose between no or yes. So it's an answer that will be respected. So I became aware of this for the first time, and I understood I could either say yes to that thing that I could not understand, or I would have regretted it forever. Of course, saying yes implies giving up something else. On Easter night, in the memory of our baptism, we repeat, I renounce Satan, his works, and his seductions. This criterion of renunciation is decisive at all ages, at the beginning for the decision and along the path for fidelity. Ultimately, the criterion of renunciation is the seal of truth on every form of vocation. It is the conscious acceptance of the pain of Jesus Christ and of the contradiction that is mixed in every human life. Saint Teresa Benedict of the Cross says, the cross is not a goal in itself. It is a very strong weapon, the weapon of Christ, where David can go out and meet the infernal Goliath, the triumphal symbol with which he knocks at the door of heaven and throws it wide open. Then the streams of divine light bursts forth, overwhelming all those who march in the wake of the crucified one. It is not only one chapter of the rule of Benedict offers criteria for discernment, but the whole rule is a key to discernment, starting from the very first words. Listen, my son. The ability to listen is a decisive criterion because it gives rise to the ability to follow audio obedience, to be a disciple, and to be open to be taught. It often happens that a personal intuition or an inspiration, instead of becoming a stimulus for becoming a disciple, becomes a personal project on the basis of which all the proposals of life that one encounters are judged. The result is that the person remains alone with his or her project. The monastic tradition sums it up, as I said, that whoever sets out to follow himself or herself sets out to follow a fool. The classic criteria proposed by the rule of Saint Benedict are the 3 O's from the Latin words, opus Dei, obedientia, obrobria. Starting with the first. Opus Dei means put nothing before the Opus Dei, that is to say, the liturgical celebration, which can also be translated by another criterion always present in the rule. Put nothing before the love of Christ. That is the same criterion by which the Council Fathers began the documents of the Council with the Constitution on the Sacred Liturgy. If it is true that to a certain extent it defines the professionalism of monastic life, giving glory to God through the common celebration of the liturgy, it is also true that it expresses also a priority that should be present in any form of vocation. In other words, there is no possibility of true discernment outside a real relationship of friendship with Christ. Pope Benedict XVI said, we have another measure, the Son of God is the measure of true humanism. Adult is not a faith that follows the ways of fashion and delays novelty. Adult and mature is a faith deeply rooted in friendship with Christ. It is this friendship that opens us to all that is good and gives us the criterion for discerning between true and false, between deception and truth. This adult faith is what we have to mature. This relationship with the human person is expressed and grows in prayer, and prayer is the principal means for the formation of conscience. Ratzinger distinguishes it into 2 levels, anamnesis and memory, and application in judgment and decision. Anamnesis of our origin, of the beginning, which derives from the fact that our being is constituted in the likeness of God. It's not a knowledge that is already conceptually articulated. It's something that is inside of us, so that those who are called upon if they are not closed up in themselves, are able to recognize its echo within themselves, and they realize this is what my nature inclines me towards and what it seeks. Forming conscience is the journey of a lifetime in which we learn to share the feelings of Jesus Christ by taking on his choices. A family that does not pray will not last long. Priest that does not pray lacks an essential element. So this is valid for any kind of religious consecration. Obedience, then, which is the response to Christ's call, becomes a vow, a promise made to God. In monastic life, which encompasses the ability to know through faith, obedience, the ability to love, chastity, the ability to hope, poverty, but also in any other relationship, in whatever form, there is a fundamental obedience to the depositum fidei, which is expressed in relationships of charity with others, in relating to others as members of the same mystical body. Obedience begins with a willingness to receive formation from someone else, from another. And I read a text by William Santieri that says, possessing the seed of God's creature, a kind of formless matter from which the good man will emerge, offers it to its author so that he may give it form. That is why the simplicity of who's new in the religious life and has not yet the capacity to follow Lord must follow the commandments as if he was following someone else. And he will be ready to accept the discretion of the one who, in the moving wheel of obedience, in the fire of trial, shapes and forms him. This is the law of fraternal relations, the law of community unity. Everyone follows another, someone else, and unity is given by this common following. Obedience means to understand our identity. Maybe I will not dwell on the third O. The third O is the obrobria. That means the experience of humiliation. When someone says, I don't understand anything, I'm a failure, well, this is wrong. But you're always loved by God, so this is what it means. So the criteria of discernment are listening to the conscience in the liturgical life, a capability to listen to who can form you, and have a stability of obedience to the project that God has on my life to create a brotherly community.
Well, in this second answer, I believe that, Mother, you've really got to the point, as some of these great words of yours for today's contemporary context, they may resound as challenging, but not just as challenging. I would even say unintelligible. When you insisted upon the fact that the fundamental question when one is considering vocation is not what I desire, is not what I want, is not what is best suited for me, but is what you want, is what is suited to your will. We would find it difficult not to fall into the risk of alienation, as psychoanalysis experts would call it. Or you also insisted on another strong expression, that is, every yes is renouncing. After Freud, maybe there's not more suspicious word. We know that is discernment of human beings are related to scrutatio of inner life, and it is also intertwined with all the prejudices with respect to the very word obedience in itself. So this is a whole new approach to inner life, that is that of psychology, psychoanalysis, etc. And today, more than ever, it is really hard to use these words in a context where society and culture really question the value itself of these terms. And in particular, I may refer to my experience accompanying in discernment for 4 or 5 years. When I was in the States, I had the opportunity to help some young people, to help them in discernment, in understanding virginity, and in a context where there was a lot of individualism. And I really became aware of something that I could really touch with my hands. It is not chastity, it's not poverty, as words that are fearful for young people. What is seen as problematic is really the word obedience. That is, to fulfill totally my life, I have to abandon myself to someone else's will. To what extent is this true? These are open questions. No, is it still true? Is this still true today as it used to be? Well, we have to repropose and re-understand these words: obedience, renunciation, sacrifice, these words that you have just spoken, in a way that can be perceived as reasonable. And they are more valid than ever, but valid in such a way that they may not be perceived as in contradiction with the quest for freedom, which is the most characteristic trait of contemporary human beings' sensitivity. I know that you have some comments in this respect, but let's consider the big issue in contemporary church on abuse. So we are very well aware of the risks as authority that is called to give an authoritative word, advice, and all the wounds of the suffering that have been present in contemporary church and that have involved even nuns, not just priests, even monastic realities. These wounds are very well spread. And today, what is also spread is also a kind of fear in exercises authority, as there is this fear of violating people's freedom and intimate discernment. So let's go to the last question that I have already directed in a way for the answer, but I would like to hear from you about this. What are, in your opinion, the challenges, the difficulties, or even just the new questions that arise from today's context for those who are called? How can today's young people be helped, as they are, to discern their vocation? For example, I refer to liberal culture that conceives one's freedom as pure self-determination. So if I direct myself to vocation, it is a sort of seen as a renunciation of my own freedom, my own liberty, or consider just the very notion of vote. It is forever, but that means that I cannot choose. Is that the way it is seen? So these are big questions, really. So what is freedom? That's where we get back to. So do you think that today's generation of young people has new characteristics that in some ways require changes, even in us, in the way that we accompany them or not.
Da una prima
I start with something you said about means that I cannot choose anymore. Oh, well, this is not true. It is actually the opposite. It means that I promise to continue to choose. I continue to choose the good that chose me. So this is the only way my freedom can grow to its maximum level. And this, in a way, tells me what is one of the biggest challenges that the generation of today has to face. Each generation is unique. Each generation requires a new capacity for tradition and is as the task to respond in its own way to the set of circumstances in which it is called. I still have before my eyes the spectacle, so to speak, of the latest jubilee of the youth, the presence of an enthusiastic, convinced generation that moved in every way, a generation that truly embodied the pilgrimage of hope. However, this wonderful generation is facing unprecedented challenges of unique magnitude. In the first place, and well, I summarize first, and then I'll go back to each point, the recovery of an adequate anthropology. As St. Paul said, what are the obedience, the other factors of human presence? In anthropology, faced with a gender ideology, an ideology where a person is constantly changing. The reconstruction of an adequate anthropology is to create a social tissue of meanings. So the culture of vocation. We don't have a vocabulary in a way. We do not understand the terms of tradition. We have references in the liberal world and in the thought of Marx, but the reference to the thought of man escapes us. And then emerging from the crisis that has been caused by abuse in a positive way, not choosing the abusive paradigm of the only description to refer to, but rediscovering the true meaning of the word obedience, freedom, and that is to say, recovering the true meaning of authority, and consequently be fathers and mothers in the faith. So, the fragmentation of a cultural tissue that has a common language, words that have the same meaning. So this is the word of the Krav Center for the research of anthropology that promotes and sustains every kind of research action to facilitate a culture of vocation in our society. In this sense, as the Code of Chronic Right says, for every faithful, because of their regeneration in Christ, there is a true equality, dignity, and activity, not only for laymen, nuns, or priests, all together in the difference. So it resembles the prayer by Christian Dicherge, by playing with differences. The most important challenge at the moment is the reconstruction of an adequate anthropology based on the revelation of the human person, was created in the image of God, with the relationship of trust, authorship, and the true sonship. But as far as the Imago Dei is concerned, there has been a completely change. This has, in a way, witnessed a cultural paradigm so that man can declare himself autonomous, auto-constituted. So atheism was the necessary base. This first change, God is what I imagine him to be, leads to the loss and the self-conscious of the dimension of transcendence. So this is actually a dimension that needs to be aware inside of us, so that what is the beginning and the end, what is transcendent and at the same time something that is part of us, as St. Augustine said. The author of the book, The Disinherited, presents a further reversal of the conception of three figures who contributed creating the educational emergency in which we found ourselves today. Why? What it does depend from. Let's think about the 1968, but a link of the chain has gone lost. A generation has refused to receive, to accept tradition. The same generation has given orders not to pass it on. This could be the death of culture, and in particular of Christian culture. We have talked about the questions of vocation, but it is vocations that are lacking, or do we lack fathers and mothers? It seems that there are not enough people that can accept the challenge of what the other is. The difference between the gap between one generation and the next one is due to the generation of fathers and mothers who didn't have the awareness of being children, sons and daughters. So how can they transmit the sense of birth? They just say, well, you are there by chance, do what you want, because you have your own answer. You need to find out for yourself what you want to be, because I don't want to violate your freedom. So this is a condemnation to absolute loneliness. And this is what goes back to the parable by Bernard. So who tells me that I'm in the world with a good destiny if no one explains me what this is? So to recover the gap between generations is what young generations have to do. They are children of fathers and mothers who have forgotten to be children themselves and have to carry out this task. And this, in a way, is an answer to vocation. So, well, I don't want to dwell on a philosophic observation, but know yourself that is at the basis of philosophic schools, as the school of the monastery, that care of the soul that has gone lost today. The knowledge of ourselves, of what we are, in only our beauty, greatness, and misery at the same time, avoids the ignorance of ourselves and of our greatness and of God, that does not take into consideration its own smallness. These two elements translate in the awareness of being sons and daughters. The rediscovery of this awareness makes it possible to recover the tradition in the light of our mission, what has been inherited. As Pope Benedict XVI said, the monks didn't want to create a culture, they wanted to look for God. Now, what are the specific challenges that generations born to fathers who were not children themselves, who cut ties with a heritage that was not only cultural but also anthropological and faith-based? What are the challenges they have to face? And I go back to some descriptions of common vice of today's society that is described as acedia, or laziness of the heart. Traditional Christian anthropology says that such sadness stems from a lack of magnanimitas, that is to say, the greatness of the soul. the inability to believe in the greatness of the human vocation that is what God designed for us. Man doesn't have confidence in his own true greatness. He wants to be more realistic. Metaphysical laziness is therefore identical to the pseudo-humility that is so widespread today. Man does not want to believe that God cares for him, knows him, loves him, watches over him, and is close to him. Today, there is a strange hatred of man against his own greatness. Man sees himself as the enemy of life, of the balance of creation, the great disturber of the peace of nature, the one who would be better off not existing, the failed creature. Man's liberation and that of the world would consist in destroying himself and the world, eliminating the spirit, making the specific nature of the human being disappear so that nature might return to its unconscious perfection, its own rhythm and its own wisdom. A society that makes what is authentically human a purely private affair and defines itself in total profanity, which in a way becomes very melancholic for its own nature, a place of despair, because it's founded on a reduction of human dignity. The daughters of this laziness of the art, with the despair from the womb of the lazy retreat from the greatness of man loved by God, leads to the evagatio mentis, the distracted restlessness of the spirit. As Thomas says, no man can dwell in sadness. But if the bottom of the soul is sadness, one necessarily arrives at a continuous flight of the soul from itself, a profound restlessness. Man is afraid of being alone with himself. Man loses his own center, becomes an intellectual vagabond who is always away from himself. Symptoms of this wandering restlessness are verbosity and curiosity. Man flees from thought and speech, since his gaze toward the infinite is taken away, and he is looking for substitutes. Further attitudes reinforce this. Inner restlessness, a sick, uninterrupted search for the new as a substitute for the loss of the inexhaustible surprise of divine love. Finally, the lack of stability of man. Bernard, who says that curiosity is the first step of a way to see oneself as something great. This leads to a melancholy that is full of sadness. So we need to find back an anthropology that is suitable for the true nature of the human condition. Well, I think that's enough.
Mi sembra che ci hai dato.
I think that you have given us enough to meditate upon for a while. Sister Maria Francesca's intense remarks would really require to go back to that, and I hope that the text that she has read and summarized may be made available. I would like to thank you all for the sacrifice of being here with us. Thank you for sharing your reflections on such an important topic. And as a way of slogan, I retained these strong words, prophetic words that you have spoken in the last answer. There's no vocation, so there's no fathers and mothers. Perhaps there are no vocations because there's no persons who have the courage to be father and be mother. And there's no people who have the courage of being father and mother because there's no willingness to be radically present as a son or a daughter. Somebody whom we know has said something similar, but with different words. Nobody generates if they're not generated. So we have come here trying to understand something more about our own vocation, and eventually we have discovered that the first vocation is being children and is being father and mothers, sons and daughters, fathers and mothers, most than anything else. With all that this implies, does not imply. There would be so much to add, but we have just 1 minute, 20 seconds left, so I must now read the final announcements to close the session. A couple of announcements. Announcement number 1. Please remember that this session was organized by Trace, the international magazine of communion and liberation. If you want to subscribe or renew your subscription or buy new subscriptions for your friends and relatives, you can do that at the specific dedicated desk in the A3 hall. Traces is not just the monthly magazine. Every day on the online CL website that has just been renewed, you will find stories, comments, interviews, debates, and videos. All this content can help us understand what happens in the world. So please, you're all very welcome to visit it, subscribe to its newsletter, and to follow us on the social network of Traces and CL to keep abreast of everything. And then announcement number 2 about the meeting. Each of us can give a decisive contribution to the meeting. Every donation is a new brick to build places of meeting, beauty, and hope. Throughout the Fair Trade Center, you will find the Dona Ora desks. You will find a big red heart marking them. Remember that the Meeting Foundation is a third sector entity, and if you support the meeting, you can take advantage of fiscal schemes for your declaration. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the meeting.
Questo è un luogo che genera dialogo,
Qualcuno che si impegna, che si
che
batte.
approfondisce la conoscenza e sostiene la fiducia. È un crocevia dove si incontra chi desidera il vero, il bello, il giusto e il bene. È una testimonianza di speranza nel cuore ferito del presente. E tutto questo
Proporre con la propria vita.
esiste anche grazie a te.